So, Jonah, everybody knows, or should know, liberal fascism, tyranny of cliches, Fox News, syndicated column. I think what hardly anybody knows, and I don't know, is how you came to be Jonah Goldberg. I mean, were you always, I'll sort of do three questions bundled together.
Sure.
Were you always a conservative growing up as a kid, or when did you first become interested in politics and political life, and what were the decisive influences on forming your thinking?
There's a lot in there.
Right.
First of all, happy to be here with the beautiful metropolitan St. Petersburg behind us. So I grew up on the Upper West Side of Manhattan. The line I always use is, we were like Christians in ancient Rome, right? We're one of the very few conservative families around. And I sort of grew up in more drenched in politics than I realized. It's sort of like if you grew up in a Yiddish-speaking household, you don't realize how much Yiddish you pick up or something. Probably a terrible analogy, certainly for my detractors. But, both my parents were very, very, very political people. My dad was sort of your classic Jewish intellectual, very much a neocon type, even if he wasn't, I don't think he would ever have called himself a neocon, at least not until late in life.
But you never rebelled against it, though, like many teenagers do.
I had my moments of confusion, I'll say. I remember about 10th grade, I was reading a lot of Marx and all that kind of stuff, just because I thought it was forbidden, that kind of thing. So my dad's idea of hobbies were basically moving from one end of the couch to the other end of the couch to read a different magazine, or going to Europe and going to museums, and big chunks of or going on long walks with his sons, explaining why Stalin was a bad man. I mean, that was sort of my dad. And
sounds like a Woody Allen movie.
Yeah, a little bit. I love my dad. My dad had the greatest, driest sense of humor. For people who actually want to know more, we ran the eulogy to my dad on NRO years ago, and I rerun it every Father's Day as sort of a little ritual. But he was a brilliant, quiet, shy guy that you really had to sort of get comfortable before he started being really funny. And my mom is sort of the polar opposite. Lots of people, I should say more people know who my mom is. My mom is Lucianne Goldberg. She is the proprietor of Lucianne.com, for those who don't know. It's amazing how many people I run into now who say, "That Lucianne is your mom?" I'm like, yeah. And my mom was, so my dad ran away from home the way nice Jewish boys from the Bronx run away from home, which is to say, he graduated from high school when he was 15 years old and went to the University of Michigan. And my mom ran away from home the way nice Southern waspy girls run away from home, which is to say, they sent her to a reform school to finish her high school education because she was troubled. And
what? Such a surprise to hear about your mom.
Yeah. So, and for those people who don't know, so her first brush with national scandal was she was a reporter for something called the Women's News Service in the early 70s, and she was a reporter on the McGovern press plane in the 72 election, and it was revealed that she was taking inducements to report back what was going on to people in the Nixon campaign. And this was a huge embarrassment for my father because one of the very small things that my father's news syndicate oversaw was my mom's news syndicate. And that created quite a kerfuffle. My mom submitted a resignation immediately when they got caught, and they accepted it immediately. My dad submitted his resignation immediately, and they rejected it, and he kept his job.
Now, how old are you at this point? You must have only been, 8 or something? Or
No,
not
even that. I think literally one of my first memories, truly first memories, is my parents yelling at me to stay quiet during the Watergate hearings.
Okay, right.
I was about 3 years old then,
right.
3-4 years old. And one of my dad's best friends was a guy, you're one of the last people around who might remember him, Victor Lasky.
Oh, sure.
So he was one of my dad's best friends. He was actually my brother's godfather. And so the joke I always tell people is, I've been in the conservative movement for a long time. I met Pat Buchanan at my bris. He was introduced to my dad by Victor Lasky, and the line was something along the lines of, "Sid," my dad's name was Sid, "Sid, I want you to meet Pat Buchanan. He is a terrific red baiter." And it was meant entirely as a compliment. And so anyway, but I didn't focus on a lot of this stuff growing up. I was much more into comic books for sure, Dungeons and Dragons, sci-fi, all that kind of stuff. Later, girls, beer, whatnot.
The sensible things.
The sensible
right.
things. And never wanted to be a journalist. Certainly never wanted to be a reporter, and I'm still not a reporter, but I always had this notion that was someone who was on the sidelines rather than a participant. And to the extent I ever wanted to be involved in politics, I thought I wanted to be in the arena. I grew out of that, but that was the idea I had. To the extent I had any idea about it at all.
What did you want to do?
I wanted to write comic books. I wanted to write comic books and science fiction novels. And to this day, I still think once I get, to use a term from social science, my FU money, I will try my hand at writing a novel.
Now, your critics might say about comic books, never mind. You know that. That's too easy.
So anyway, went to a very mediocre private school on the Upper West Side of on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, which is not there anymore. It was always sort of a raging debate about whether or not it was the worst school on the A list or the best school on the B list.
Now, a Jewish school or just
no,
an ordinary...
my grade school, I went to Rodef Sholem Day School, which was one of the first Reformed Jewish schools in the country. And it was basically for parents who wanted to raise their kids Jewish, but not too Jewish. And I have mixed feelings about Rodef Sholem. I think it takes its Jewishness a lot more seriously now, but I could be wrong about that. It's also much more liberal than even when I was there in the 70s, and it was by all means a liberal school. No, high school was a straight up sort of preppy, the headmaster had a great sense of Anglophilia, but didn't have the follow through to actually make it like a good British prep school.
Right. Uniforms and the whole bit?
Well, so this is one of the first problems. It had a dress code, but not uniforms. And the problem is that if you have a dress code, the whole point of uniforms is to lessen class differences, right? And a dress code, meaning just a jacket and tie is required, or turtleneck, whatever, means that the rich kids can wear Armani every day, and the poor kids can wear the same jacket and tie all 5 years they were in the school. And you know, they get it with their sleeves like this, and by the end their sleeves are like this. And it wasn't a terrible school, but it did nothing to help me with my underachiever problems. And
oh, really? See, I didn't know this. Okay.
Oh yeah, so we had a trimester system at Dwight, and of the 18 trimesters I was at Dwight, I was the only one from 7th to 12th grade, right? I think it's 18. I was the only one who never once made honor roll, which is above 85% grade point average. And I was, again, literally rejected from every college I applied to.
So you were sort of an underachiever, you're telling me, or
I was a huge underachiever.
And
every year I had to wait till mid-May to get the letter from the school to find out whether I was going to be invited back to attend next year.
Now, were you bored with school, or
there was a lot of that?
Okay.
I got A's in the classes that I really liked the teacher, and but also I was very lazy, and so if for things like math, which really are cumulative, right?
Yeah.
You actually, if you don't learn A and B, it's really hard to do C. I was just my own worst enemy. Went to summer school at least 2 years for math, and it became, you know, I was truly a classic underachiever where I got it in my head, which is incredibly stupid, that my reputation of being smart would only be undermined if I tried, because then all of a sudden people say, well, he tried, and look how he didn't do all that great. We always thought he had such potential. You maintain this is the classic underachiever's dilemma of you maintain the mythology of your massive untapped potential if you never tap into it, and so it was really terrible. My senior year, you know, as happens at least in private schools in New York where everyone is expected to go to college, my senior year, the senior class advisor is doing the spiel about how, you guys are screwing around too much. You know, your college applications are out, but you have to take school a little seriously. And she says, look, you have to be mature. You're all going to college next year. And about a dozen of my reprobate buddies all in unison, unprompted, shouted, "Except Jonah," because I hadn't been accepted in any colleges yet.
Oh, no.
And so I ended up going to Goucher College, which was, had its drawbacks. Was not actually a terrible school, though. It was historically the sister school of Johns Hopkins, right? So people used to call it the eighth sister school because Hopkins wasn't an Ivy League and all that. So it was the Radcliffe to Johns Hopkins, Harvard kind of thing. But Hopkins had gone co-ed, I don't know, a decade or two before, and Goucher had stayed single sex. And so my freshman year was the year they first admitted men as a whole co-ed class. So
what percent of men were there that first year? I mean,
well, look, first of all, this is a joke I've used before, but you should feel very honored that you're interviewing the Rosa Parks of gender integration here. So my freshman year, there were 30 odd men and over 1,000 women, and I do mean odd men because. So there are no FCC rules about this, so I can be a little blunt about this. So 10% of the male student body came from my high school, 3 guys. Just under 7% of the male student body was Korean American and named Derek, 2 guys. And I once did the math about what that would mean at the University of Michigan, and it's like 1,800 Korean American Dereks running around. But but I'd say about a third of the guys, my freshman year at least, went there because they could have gone into other schools, right? I got there because I had high SAT scores, and I had a kind of transcript and recommendations. Like a lot of teachers, liked me, and they saw something in me, and I won all these awards at graduation, but I was just a screw up. And so, if you're in a risk-taking mood, you throw me a lifeline and see what happens, right? But a lot of these guys just had straight up better schools they could have gone to, but they honestly and truly thought that this was their only chance of getting laid in a 4-year school of higher education, and that's why they picked Owens, which meant I had very few. This is actually one of the most enduring lessons I got out of my time in Goucher was men need other men, right? They need male friends. They need to hang out with men, and if I had gone to Cornell or Syracuse or the University of Wisconsin, places where a lot of my friends had gone, I would have probably ended up finding another 200 people sort of like me, sort of pseudo-intellectual demi-Jews from the Upper West Side of Manhattan types, right? And but because I went to the school, my friends my freshman year, and really through college, were people I never would have been friends with if I'd gone to a normal college.
Oh, interesting.
My roommate my freshman year was a pretty hardcore deadhead hippie kind of rock climber guy, very strange guy, good guy. Another friend of mine was a sort of Italian gigolo type guy from Rhode Island. Another guy was a jock from Australia via Princeton, and another one was a good old boy from Houston. They're just different people who thought I was as exotic as I thought they were, and that was a very and the thing is, if you didn't make friends with these guys, you just weren't going to have guy friends, and so that was a really interesting part of it. We're going pretty far afield here, but so anyway, I got a lot out of Goucher. What happened there is what happens at a lot of single-sex schools when they go co-ed. The new gender that come in, right? So at Vassar, the women took over everything. At Goucher, the men just were self-selected to want to be the first male this and the first male that. So I took over the school newspaper. I was big in student government. I got into a lot of political fights because the students there, and I don't blame them because I'm a conservative and a traditionalist, the girls there did not want it to go co-ed. So there was a lot of feminist Sturm und Drang going on, and I took a lot of women's studies courses. I probably read more Foucault than I did Federalist Papers.
Well, now, pause for a minute here. Had you gotten more interested in politics by this point? Or more serious about
a little bit. It was fun
conservatism?
being a troublemaker.
I see.
And, I ran for freshman class president my freshman year. And my posters, I did not take it very seriously. And so my posters, among other things they said, were make Mommy Goldberg a happy camper, put a nice Jewish boy in office. And
well, I thought you were going to tell me you'd promise free beer for all the drinking fountains, which is the more predictable.
well, no, that's something similar came later. And of course, when I lost, the headline of the school paper was "Freshman class disappoints Mrs. Goldberg, elects so-and-so president." And I should clarify, I'm actually not that Jewish. You know, I mean, I grew up in that milieu, and I make jokes about it and all the rest, but I'm not that observant and all of that. But I just and Rodef Sholem again was it was the first Reformed Jewish school, which is sort of the last exit before atheism. And so anyway, and I got involved in it. I got deeply involved in the politics of the place, and I liked having the fights. I liked mixing it up, and so I got a little bit of a bug for it there.